at the beginning if it was intimidating to start writing a research paper, because I, again, didn't have that experience. But as you kind of, get in the groove of doing it, it becomes really exciting. And I've actually prepared a few slides in which I want to guide you through all the steps and all the elements you should have in your research paper. So I will quickly again share my screen. And I will try to go through these elements quickly, but at the end, if people have more questions, more detailed questions about this, I would be very happy to answer them. So here on this list, you can see the elements that you will need to have in your research paper for IGO or other Olympiads, and I will try to guide you through all of these. So the first thing you need to have in your research paper is a cover page. Since we are high school students, why not make a cover page something exciting? Here is an example of a cover page I've done for one of the science Olympiads with my friends. And as you can see, we have the name of the project, we have our names, our mentor's name, and we have a picture with a feather which is burning, which tries to represent what the judging panel will actually be able to see in the research paper. So I would say, since we are very young, we can make it very fun. It doesn't have to be boring. So try to make your cover page exciting to draw in the audience to want to read your research paper. Then the next element of a research paper is the abstract. So the abstract is basically a paragraph or a few paragraphs which represent a concise summary of your whole research. It's usually half to a page long, more often half a page than a page. So I would say think about that. And it basically answers the questions of, well, what is your research purpose? Why you're doing what you're doing? What is the relevance? Are you trying to fill a gap that other people haven't addressed? Are you trying to make something that could help people? Then you quickly say, what is your procedure for performing this research? Have you used a specific programming language, or have you gone to the lab to do specific experiments? And then finally, you report on what are the main outcomes, the main conclusions of the long research you've been working on. The next element is the introduction. This is really the place where you can talk about everything you've learned during that initial literature research that I was mentioning, during which you try to figure out whether your research question was worth pursuing. So in this segment, you report on what did other people do? What approaches did they use? Is there a gap that you can fill with your research? What is your hypothesis? What do you predict will happen if you do your experiments, if you make your app? And as we are, again, high school students, in the introduction, we can also talk about what inspired that specific research, what influenced your focus on that specific research question. The next element in a research paper is the materials and methods section. And I would say here you really need to be very specific about what you did. So here you report all the procedures you had in collecting your data or in developing that code. Then you report on all the materials you used, and you report on the exact amounts and the exact procedures you handled those materials with. You then explain the steps in your experimental procedure. And what I would say the most important question you need to ask yourself at the end of this segment is, could somebody repeat what I did based on what I have written here? So if you have reported on the exact amounts of materials you used and the procedures you collected your data with, then it is very likely that your experiment will be repeatable by other people. So this is super important. The next section is the results section, and this is the section where I would say I like to brag with what I actually achieved with my experiments. So this is a section where you show all your measurements and all your observations, all your results, but then you show those results in a way that will draw the audience in. You use graphs, tables, and charts, and I'm sure that in all of your schools there are professors who can help you create very legible and very nice looking graphs, charts, and tables. So use these graphic tools to show how interesting your findings are. The next section is the discussion section, and in this section you really explain your findings. You try to explain why did you get the results you have gotten through that specific experiment. Then what you do is you try to compare your results to those in the literature. Are my results similar to what other people have reported? If they are, that's great. That means, my experimental procedure is really good. If they are not, maybe you've found a better procedure that results in much more precise results. So that's also something very important to report on. The next segment, which is kind of similar to the abstract in the way that I always write my conclusion and my abstract at the end, because they are the result of the materials and methods and the introduction and everything that was in between. Conclusion is basically a paragraph or a few paragraphs that is, again, 1 page or less, in which you try to concisely summarize your main research findings. Then also, very importantly, you mention what else could be done that you just didn't have enough time to do in those few months or in a year or a few years, and that you could be doing after the Science Olympiad. The judging panel really, really likes to hear, how would you proceed with this research? They want to know that you didn't just develop this for the purpose of winning a gold or silver or bronze medal. They want to know that you're really excited about your research. And then you can also talk about what are the practical applications of your research. Can it help someone? Can it help my grandma in her village? Or can it help a company? So report what is the significance of your research. One more section you need to have is the acknowledgement section, in which basically you try to acknowledge all the help you had. Although you had to develop your research on your own, there are people who are going to provide advice, who are going to provide labs, who are going to provide their computers. So thank those people. Here is just an example of an acknowledgement section I wrote for one of the research pieces I've been doing that you can read later for your spare time. And you can, of course, add or subtract things from this. And then finally, as the final section of the research paper, you have the reference and bibliography section, which is basically a list of all the studies you've cited in your research paper. And when you think back about the introduction, I mentioned in the introduction, you try to talk about everything that other people have done related to this research. So it is very likely that in the introduction section, you will have a lot of references based on the literature research you have done. This is just an example of how to cite a book, but I would recommend, going online or even reaching out to your professors in your middle schools or high schools to ask them how to cite articles, how to cite websites or other forms of resources that you're using. So with this, I would like to, close my kind of introduction to how to write a research paper. And at the end of this presentation or this talk, I would be very happy to answer more specific questions. And I will also share my email with you if some people are interested in that.